Governor Walz talks how normal people talk, they said, okay? He was using commonly understood shorthand for these treatments. Again, like, why do they have to explain everything that comes out of this guy's mouth?
The pit in my stomach when the phone rang and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way. And also
Whoa! My kids were born through that way? That's the most damning one of all. Tim Walz busted lying again. And the New York Times in this article is doing their very, very best to cover for him, to make a bunch of excuses like, it's confusing terminology and all these letters are a lot of work to remember. It's very complicated. And so guys like Tim Walz and lefty Democrats who live their entire lives based on acronyms, LGBTQ+, expialidocious, all the different letters are in there and they live by this. Apparently he got confused about IVF. Now let's go through this. Now, unlike in vitro, the procedure used by the Walzes, here's the headline, that his journey ran not through IVF, but through another common treatment. Now let's get into this because there's a clear campaign lie that is documented by the Times. As Walz introduced himself to the country, he's alluded to a journey. He's always alluding to these things. His journey through infertility for his family while warning that conservatives want to restrict IVF. Here's what he said. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule, mind your own damn business, when he's not setting up snitch lines for people to report COVID violations. Mr. Walz said on the night that Kamala introduced him, he said, look, that includes IVF. And this gets personal for me and my family. IVF, because you're implying that he went through it, right? Many have assumed that his family relied on IVF to conceive their 2 children. But several news outlets, including the Times, the Associated Press, the Minnesota Star Tribune, have reported all that the family relied on in vitro. Okay, the New York Times linking to themselves. They didn't do that, but they did. The Associated Press, they all posted fake news. Now, fertility advocates concluded as much after hearing Mr. Walz talk. In April, Tim Walz for governor, their campaign office, mailed out a fundraising letter in an envelope that said this, quote, in an envelope, my wife and I used IVF to start a family. So that, if you're reading that, that means to the person who's receiving that message that they actually got the procedure done. But when asked if the Walzes wanted to share more details about their efforts to conceive, the Harry Walz campaign recently clarified that the couple did not rely on IVF at all, but rather another common fertility procedure called intrauterine insemination, or IUI. That's really strange. It's like, he did it again. His command sergeant major, no, it's not what your rank was. Well, I wanted it to be. Well, it's not what you retired with, so you can't keep saying that. IVF is very politically appropriate right now, but that's not what he did. The treatments have a key distinction, okay? They're not the same. Unlike IVF, IUI does not involve creating or discarding embryos, which is the big problem with IVF, right? The idea with IVF is that you get, 4 or 5 embryos, you inseminate them, then you implant them back into the woman. And in doing that, you're going to lose some embryos, right? And there's a problem with that. People say, well, it's like discarding a potential life, so that's a problem. IUI does not have that same distinction. But for people having trouble getting pregnant, the procedures are often linked. Now, this is where the cope comes in from the Times. Some patients say that they're doing IVF. It's just a catch-all for a wide range of fertility treatments. It's like, I'm just going to the doctor to get something done. No, it's pretty specific. Walz has said that he and his wife spent 7 years trying to have children. Now, IVF has a much higher success rate than the others, but reproductive endocrinologists and fertility doctors may suggest that people struggling with infertility start with the IUI. Much less expensive, much less invasive. In both cases, patients often take hormone medication to induce or to augment the ovulation, and individuals who are going through 2 procedures often walk through similar emotional journeys. So it's like close enough, where success can bring elation, but the results, if you fail, are devastating. We understand. Now, those who begin such treatments can also find themselves entering a word of dizzying, occasionally awkward medical terminology. It's so confusing for him. And here we're going to get into a lot of TMI, but IUI works by taking some, male juice and trying to mimic natural conception. The IVF process often involves creating and freezing multiple embryos in the laboratory and then transferring the ones that's probably the healthiest. But since Mr. Walz began sharing his story, he has typically referred to his family as having undergone treatments like IVF. Governor Walz talks how normal people talk, they said, okay? He was using commonly understood shorthand for these treatments. Again, like, why do they have to explain everything that comes out of this guy's mouth? By tying IVF to his family's experience, Walz has become a powerful messenger for the Democratic Party on a difficult issue. Yeah, even though he has no connection to it, who have tried to distance themselves to restrict the popular procedure. procedure. And Trump has come out and I believe said that he's for this, okay? He's for IVF. Now, infertility struggles are common. 1 in 7 women have them, and so it's complicated. Now, the issue of this entered the national spotlight when stuff in Alabama came out. He posted on Facebook, apparently, Gwen and I have 2 beautiful children because of reproductive health care like IVF. Don't let these guys get away with you telling you that they support IVF when their handpicked judges oppose it. And blasting JD Vance for opposing IVF. Like, he did it. Now, yeah, this woman was very excited about this. She's a ranking Democrat on the Veterans Affairs Committee. She recalled coming away from the speech with an understanding that Mr. Walz was an IVF dad, right? So even fooled another Democrat. Miss Kalora said that she was surprised but not bothered to learn that no, it was actually different. Yeah, it's close enough. Somebody is actually telling their fertility story, and that's what counts. And these are very delicate, so it's close enough, right? It's the same thing. In a statement, Miss Walz, who was working as a high school English teacher as the couple was undergoing fertility treatment, said that the only person who knew in detail what it was a next door neighbor. She was a nurse. She helped me with the IUI process. And the journey that is infertility, desperation eats away at your soul. So the guy just lies, right? He just lies about stuff. He put it on a campaign envelope that said very specifically that they used IVF. My wife and I used IVF to start a family. No, you didn't. You used IUI. I'm a command sergeant major. No, you're not. I was the high school coach. No, you weren't. You were an assistant coach. I don't like spices on my tacos. Yes, you do. You won a cooking competition 3 times. Why are you lying about all this stuff? And he comes across as like this folksy, down-to-earth dude who's just going to tell you, the truth and speak plainly with you because he's one of us kind of a thing. No, not true at all. The dude's a snake and a liar. Tom S. Elliott dropped this one on X, and he put together a banger thread where we can hear him actually articulate all of this stuff.
Today's IVF day. Thank God for IVF. My wife and I have 2 beautiful children. He thinks he needs to dictate that. And I've been saying this, the golden rule that makes small towns work so we're not at each other's throats all the time in a little town is mind your own damn business. I don't need him to tell me about my family. I don't need to tell him about my wife's health care and her reproductive rights. I don't need him telling my children what books they can read. He's fired to do that with whatever he wants, but I'm not interested in it. And I think rural America they are angry.
Don't tell me about my family, okay? I wouldn't have my kids, essentially. Crazy. Here's another one. Here's Walz 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia talking about it. This gets personal for me and my family.
Look, that includes IVF, and this gets personal for me and my family.
Why? You didn't do it.
When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own healthcare decisions.
And to lie about whatever happened in your past. Nobody cares. Here's another one from Walz. He's in Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. Tom S. Elliott does great work on this. Says, some of you may have heard this. Here's Walz in another state, Wisconsin.
Years of fertility treatments. And I remember each night praying that the call was going to come and it was going to be good news. The phone would ring, tenseness in my stomach.
Same speech.
And then the agony when you heard the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our first child, our beautiful daughter, we named her Hope.
Again, right? Grifting off of this IVF stuff. Here in Arizona, he was pretending to cry, apparently. This guy.
I'm not crying, you're crying, so...
You're not crying, yeah, because you're telling another lie story. So, of course, the story is pretty bad. If it was on its own, if he didn't have multiple other lies, I think maybe people would say, whatever, it's not that big of a deal, but the guy just keeps making stuff up. And so even the Kamala campaign is exploiting this. So here's what they posted. This is from Kamala HQ, their campaign Twitter account. It says, if it was up to JD Vance, I wouldn't have a family because of IVF. I wouldn't have a family if JD had his way.
Yeah, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way. And also I make...
Whoa! My kids were born through that way? That's the most damning one of all.
Sure that I'm the guys and our folks are investing in prenatal care. We're the ones that are there for universal pre-K. We're the ones that are providing school meals at this. I'm not going to back down one bit on this whole family values thing and it's us. That construct that he's putting out there is absolutely untrue. We're making it more affordable to have children by having paid family and medical leave so that you can go home when your kids are sick and take care of them. Or if you're a dad, I don't have to go right back to work 5 days later after my wife had a C-section because our insurance wouldn't pay for it. We're
No, you should get 3 months of paternity leave like Pete Buttigieg.
boosting those things up. There's nothing pro-family other than having women be incubators for their vision of this. And
Gosh.
I don't know. Once again, it's weird. I don't want J.D. Vance talking about my family. I certainly don't want him talking about my daughter or my wife. It's none of his business. But I said the one thing is we need to talk about how we've invested in families. We have the most generous child tax credit, and it's what Vice President Harris is proposing for the country, that people are poor because they don't have money. And when kids don't have the money on the front end, all of the things that chain reaction of can't learn, can't go on. So I'll challenge him on that. Where is J.D. Vance's pro-family? He's forcing people to have, not be able to have medical care if they have a bad pregnancy or something. We need to stand in front of that. And again, you don't need me to give a sermon, but try and live one. Try and be decent. Try and help your neighbors.
That dude just talked so much garbage out of his mouth. It was pretty amazing. Did you hear him say something like, if you don't have money, then you're going to be poor. And so we have to give them money so that they can do stuff so that they're not poor anymore. You're like, gosh. Look, if it was up to JD, he says, where's JD Vance's program, right? He's going to come in there and my daughter have kids or something. These people are nuts. But JD Vance actually responded today. He said, today it came out that Tim Walz had lied about having a family via IVF. Who lies about something like that? Tim Walz does. The Democrats' newest addition. Kamala's first pick, her first decision was to hire a bona fide liar, the guy who just lies over and over and over again. But what do you do about this? Well, JD Vance is doing some debate prep. He got asked a question. How are you prepping for this, JD? What are you going to do when you're dealing with a bona fide liar? Listen.
To know how you were prepping for a debate with Tim Walz, who has described himself as a bad debater. Who's helping you and how are you prepping?
Well, I found a good friend from back home who embellishes and lies a lot, and I'm having him stand in for Tim Walz. That's what we're doing during our debate.
I went and found the biggest liar that I know. Guy's a total liar. Makes up stuff all the time. So I'm going to do some practice rounds with him because he's, a liar. So it'll just be like the same thing, whatever. So here's more JD, more seriously. He's talking about his record. The guy just lies constantly. And so here's what he is saying in response.
He acts like such a tough guy, my friends. I don't know if you saw this, but Tim Walz said that he would debate me anytime, anywhere. So he threw out October 1st, a debate moderated by CBS, which I'm sure is going to be in the tank for the Democrats, but who cares? Because I respect the American people to go before hostile media.
Scared.
But when he says he'll debate anytime, anywhere, he apparently didn't mean in mid-September, because I offered him a debate in front of CNN, not exactly friends of me and Donald Trump. And you know what Tim Walz said? No thanks. Because they are hiding from the American people. My message to Kamala and Tim Walz, but especially to the American people, is the American people deserve to be led by somebody who is willing to get out there and talk to people. Kamala and Tim, stop hiding in the basement, get out there and campaign. We'd all appreciate it quite a bit.
Yeah, do something. Answer some questions from the American people. Stop your little patty cake games where you guys sit around and talk about tacos, okay? People are not interested. Now, Trump was also out today, and he is explaining that he really knows who Kamala is, which is good because she's pernicious. Got to be careful. Trump knows who he's up against. Here's what he said on the campaign trail.
We're here today to talk about how we are going to stop the Kamala crime wave that is going on at levels that nobody's ever seen before. And she is, as you know, the most radical left person ever even thought of for a high office, certainly for the office of president. People don't know the real Kamala, but I do, and people that do what I do, they also know. But she is so far left that nobody's can even imagine, and her real thoughts are there. She's changed. They call her a flip-flopper at the highest level that they've ever seen in politics because she's come out with policy and for years defund the police. You don't mind defunding, do you, fellas? Would you vote for a defunder? By the way, your people that you protect don't want defunders either.
No.
But she's been there until just recently, but she's always been for defunding the police. And the person that she's running with, Tim Walz, is equally far left. This is the most far left group. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And the press is giving them a free pass. And you're not going to have, if it was up to them, you wouldn't even have the men behind me, people behind me, representatives behind me. You wouldn't have them. They wouldn't have a job. They think it's going to just police itself. Everything's going to take care of itself.
No, they want community service response teams or something like that is going to show up and I guess counsel everybody into a calmer state. So Trump also came out and absolutely obliterated this journalist. So apparently he's in this town, and the town is called Howell, Michigan. And apparently the town has some very white supremacist tendencies or something. No disrespect to Howell, Michigan. Obviously that's ridiculous. But Trump called them out. So the useless press was like, why are you here with a bunch of white cops and white people? What kind of racist are you, Trump? Here's what he said.
Kamala Harris campaign is backing you from being in his town because they say there were white supremacists here a month ago.
They're Democrats. Who was here in 2021?
Joe Biden.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
She said Joe Biden. Who is here in 2021? Joe Biden. Okay, so how is Joe Biden a white supremacist? Good day over there in the campaign land. Trump's out. Tim Walz is a liar. Campaign continues.